As AI and automation continue to reshape the contact center industry, one question becomes more important than ever. How do we use technology to support people rather than replace them? Today's guest is Leon Sheehan, CEO of Digital Island and a recognized leader in customer experience strategy and digital transformation. With more than 20 years in the ICT sector, Leon helps organizations modernize their contact centers whilst balancing innovation, empathy, and the growing role of organizational data in shaping better customer outcomes. Welcome to the Kiwi CX Collective, Leon Sheehan.
Yeah, hi Elias. Thanks for having me. Really great to be on the pod. I'm a big fan and love the work that CCNNZ do. We've been a proud supporter of the industry for a long time now, and a valued partner. So great to be here. Thanks, Elias.
Our pleasure. It's really a genuine pleasure to have you on here. I've had the privilege of getting to know you over the last 2 or 3 years. And during that time, I've seen some great insights that you brought into the market, as well as your ability to challenge me and my thinking. So as we kick this episode of the Kiwi CX Collective podcast, let me ask you maybe a big picture question. What, Leon, are the biggest shifts that you're seeing in CX and contact centers right now?
Yeah, thanks, Elias. A couple of things that really spring to mind for me to start with is that, I've been talking for a while now, but the contact center, it's no longer just a service hub. It's become, it's the heartbeat of the organization. It's the central intelligence point for most departments now. And we see all sorts of signals coming through the business, complaint patterns, resolution data, complex interactions. It's the richest real-time kind of feedback loop that a business has. And to kind of take that a step further, I think what we're starting to see now is that the contact center, it's actually an enterprise-wide CX platform. So what used to be more of a departmental kind of tool, it's really now going right across the enterprise. We get interest from marketing, from operations, IT, technology. The contact center really is the beating heart of an organization these days. We're finding it's that connective tissue between all those things like product and marketing. So how do we change the conversation around ownership and outcomes in that space?
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. It is this now amorphous organism that's growing within the organization. So we are seeing many different departments coming together. They're all intertwined. And you can't do something in marketing without it affecting what's happening across in the contact center. You can't have some part of IT do their thing, again, without having that impact. So what do you think most organizations are getting right? And what are they getting wrong?
Yeah, I think one of the things we talk to customers a lot about these days is that metrics, they need to be tied to goals and outcomes, and not just, operational efficiency. Reducing things like handle time and ASA, they're not strategies. I mean, it's hygiene for me. The real question is, what are actually the outcomes that we're trying to drive and to get? Things like business performance, revenue retention, churn prevention. Those are the things that we need to be kind of measuring against. It's actually changing. It's not just how fast the phone gets answered these days.
I think I have to agree with you on that, because when I think about this, we are the most over-measured industry in the world, I believe. Everything is about, as you say, hygiene factors. Yes, we do need to know about the average handling time, because we need to then figure out how many, let's be crude about this, bums on seats we need. Average handling time is a metric that helps us determine that. But I was talking to Mo Adedra recently, and he said AHT should actually stand for appropriate handling time. Is it appropriate that we spend 6 minutes on a call where the reason for the call is balance in a financial services sector? And then the answer is yes, because the original inquiry about balance on a Kiwi saver was related to a need because there is a end of life situation, a medical situation happening within a family, and access to a Kiwi saver becomes critical. So as we start to think about the outcomes, which you are already talking about, it is important for us. So if you think about the shift and the change, where do you see the industry heading over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think the industry is going through quite a lot of change at the moment. In the next three to 5 years, we are starting to see more around AI orchestration becoming the new infrastructure. Contact center is the ability for having all the interactions coming in from different parts of the business, but it's routing that intelligence, sentiment analysis, problems, great things, upsell opportunities, but having that orchestrated in one central place. For me, the logical area for that is going to be actually in the contact center itself. So it actually stops becoming that department. It becomes more of a value enhancer within the business. That's one of the key things. And to kind of layer on to that a little bit more, I think we're going to have to really understand what the role is going to be for our agents and kind of what I call the interaction fabric, because we're going to have to think about how AI starts talking with AI to person to person. And so we're going to have the technology being able to handle some more of those simple and admin heavy tasks, but we're going to have more of the complex requirements that are going to come through to our agents. And for those people, it could be more like counselling rather than kind of call handling, I think, sometimes. So there's a bit of a workforce transformation challenge there that as business leaders, we've all got to be really present and thinking about. And something the industry is only just starting to get into.
Well, look, you're really hitting the nail on a very, very rich vein of a conversation here. I think you're correct. Number one, AI will not have empathy and it will automate. I accept that. And I think we've seen many instances of how well it started to automate. And contact centers have been at the cutting edge of automation for a long time. But all that's left are those complex conversations that require empathy. And we all know AI will not have that level of empathy. I love the concept you're talking about that AI will talk to AI. And that's something that I hadn't really thought about in much detail. How will that happen? How do we then put in the guardrails in place rather, to protect ourselves and protect our customers as well as our employees? So if you think about these challenges, what should leaders be paying more attention to right now?
Well, leaders, one of the first things that springs to mind for me there is that the customer and the agent are actually on the same team now. So every improvement that we can do in agent experience, it shows up in those customer outcomes. Leaders that can understand and invest in that, those are the people and the businesses that are building contact centers that are going to be relevant in 5 years. And as part of what we spoke about before, they need to start with a problem and not necessarily the product or the tech. So define actually what we're trying to achieve with humans. The market is full of vendors and kind of technologists that are going to try and sell people solutions before they've understood the problem. I think it's really important to kind of have a partner that helps you to kind of think longer term rather than just actually some of those transactional aspects that you might be wanting to consider. We're talking with customers a lot more now about, instead of optimizing for the old, actually transforming the operating model to be more future centric, to be thinking about how your customers want to engage.
The fact that you talk about getting people to think, I love that, because I remember there's a wonderful book written by a chap called John Maxwell, and he wrote books that was entitled Think for a Change. And I love that because it's a double entendre. Think for a change and just think for a change. because I don't think we think enough. And we're in this environment where if you do not understand the problem, what's the point in investing in $1,000 tool to solve $100 problem? Because your tool is far outweighed against the value of the problem it's going to solve. So I think we need to get clearer on that and stop looking at the shiny object syndrome that's in front of us and say, oh, I've got to do it to just keep up with the Joneses. But if you think about the role of organisational data, what it plays, we've got an environment where, as you said, it's now an omni-channel. People are contacting us via the website and on a web chat. They might be interacting with us on WhatsApp. We need to have an ability to understand what's going on across the board. So how is it all changing? How does organisational data play a role? And how's that changing in the contact centre?
Data is a massive business enabler these days. And it can either be an enabler or a restrictor for businesses, because it can actually enable their business evolution. It's really important to understand what data you have available in your organisation and what state it's in. Because here's the thing, you can't actually have a strong AI strategy unless you've got solid data behind it. So the question we actually often talk with about customers is your data ready? But one thing really that also we find out when we're going through these conversations is it doesn't need to be absolutely perfect, because with modern technologies and expertise, we can actually help understand the current state and what's actually required to unlock progress in that space, especially if you're trying to look to kind of build out AI use cases and things. So we need to be comfortable actually wading through some uncomfortable data sets, because it's often where the gold's located for some of those large transformations. But we need to be sourcing that data from right across the business. One of the biggest things that we find that kind of holds some companies back is that some of the data exists in silos. And when you're wanting to have information from your sales aspect, maybe some product or inventory management, if you can actually pull that information into an easily accessible place for your contact center agents, then you're not just actually resolving a problem. You can start thinking about upsell. You can start thinking about retention activity for customers. You can start thinking about, what we're trying to do that's going to add real value. So when you can bring all of those data aspects from right across the business into one space, that's where the magic can happen.
If you talk about these siloed environments, and we've mentioned this on other podcast episodes, the siloed environment is the biggest inhibitor for a successful deployment. So we've got to start to break down these silos and work together as an organization. Then the data integrity. Now, is that, I would guess, is a major investment in time and effort to understand that there's data integrity, that we've cleaned up all the information and have it ready for the deployment. Is that a limiter to people doing and implementing an AI, enhancement into their contact centers, just because of the sheer size of the project? Or is it something that we have learned on how to modularize that, how to attack it and make it much more manageable as a deployment today?
Every customer is different, but what we're trying to get across is don't be afraid of looking under the covers. You'll be surprised what great data actually you do have available that can be meaningful. And if data is a bit tricky in certain organisations, then there's kind of ways to actually help tidy that up. That's one of the great things that technology is helping us to do, is to understand the quality of the data that is available to your organisation. We're seeing real advantages in that space. It's also key here when you can call on great kind of partners that understand what is meaningful data and what's the rubbish. And that can kind of actually help move things forward a little bit quicker. But definitely don't be afraid. As I was saying before, don't be afraid to walk through when some of those data sets maybe aren't as optimized as you might think. There's certainly gold available there if you can walk through it.
So then I'm going to guess at the next level, Leon. If you're working with an environment where we know that AI is going to be playing a role in the deployment and the implementation, if I think of a personal experience, I am a heavy advocate of AI and I know its capabilities to improve my productivity. And we're seeing the shift from an LLM model to an agentic model where we are getting AI to take tasks and process tasks. Are we saying that we can use AI in a structured and confined manner to help us modify that data and analyze that data to then again speed up the process to then figure out is it useful and can we then use it to fuel the contact center?
Spot on, Elias. Data absolutely is the fuel for a contact center. Not only the data that you can access from across the organisation, but the data that the contact centre itself kind of creates. But to your question, can we use the agentic kind of capabilities that are coming through to help with these? 100%. That's what we're finding with customers to help optimise that data set. Let's use the technology that is available. It's certainly moving us much further and much faster than it's ever done before, so that we can start to kick into some of those next level projects. How do we continue to focus on that customer? How do we continue to focus on the agent? Getting the data in the right space. It's getting easier by the day, but it does require some effort.
So before I start talking about the agent side of things, I think it's a really important thing for us to expand on. Let's talk about the implementation. I'm assuming we're not talking about a one and done situation, first of all. And secondly, are we talking about a situation that's going to have long-term additional costs as you go back and refresh data and go back and update all the LLMs that you're using in the implementation? Or am I missing the point here?
No, I think you're on the right path. The only piece around ROI and budgeting for these types of things and thinking about kind of cost is actually, there is always going to be a financial element to these types of things, but we really need to make sure that we're also pulling through the customer benefit and the agent enhancements as well too. We can help customers to build out a return on investment, but what we're actually seeing quite often in New Zealand, it's quite strange because New Zealand is, according to Microsoft, is one of the 7th highest countries in the world with the adoption of AI.
Wow.
With 87% of New Zealand businesses actually using AI. But, and I'll say but, the challenge that we're seeing when talking in the market is that we're not really seeing the inertia of AI being used in reality. We're seeing a lot of customers trying with POCs, with MVPs, with low-level kind of interactions and engagements with AI, but the value driver is missing from that conversation. And I totally support getting started with AI and dipping your toe, but doing so without a goal in mind, it's just an expensive hobby and it's a waste of time. A good vendor for me is actually someone that's actually going to help you to understand the ongoing value, to help you to set those goals and consider the ROI for that, even if that's just an initial deployment. But what we don't want to see is people getting stuck at phase one because they've only budgeted the small amount to kind of think about it and actually haven't thought about the goals that it's trying to achieve. What we really want to be seeing is people thinking about what's that second phase or that future, or what's the roadmap actually that people are starting to think about to get those real benefits. We need to talk more about that organisational change rather than just the optimising for the old.
So then, if I hear you correctly, we're talking about starting with the end in mind. So it's really not just one implementation, but it's the ongoing knock-on effect. How is this going to apply across the organization? What are the problems it's going to solve, and how are we going to fund the ongoing activity? Because if I think about this, it is really the ability to say this is a long-term strategy that is designed to help us improve efficiencies. It's not going to replace people, but it's going to help us to enhance the working environment and deliver ultimately an outcome which is going to be beneficial to our customers. And if we don't do that, then why are we looking at implementation in the first place? Technology and a toy for its own use, as sexy as it might look, is not going to add value unless it delivers, as you pointed out earlier, an outcome for us. And if I think about previous implementations, we used to talk about, in my consulting days, walking into an organization and doing an analysis on the implementation. And it was either designed to go and lift revenues or reduce costs. And either of those would have an ROI associated with that. Now, when you went and reviewed post-implementation, I think in New Zealand, we had a staggering case that over maybe 80% of deployments were not delivering an ROI. And when we analysed this, we came back down to the three Ps. There was either the product, which was hardware, software, had to be fit for purpose, so we could exclude the product not working. Which then left us with the last two Ps. Second P being the process. You need a robust process to wrap around that product. So if you had done your business analysis properly and you had developed your processes with a fit for purpose product, you knew it was going to work. That left us with P, the people. The last P was if we didn't get the people engaged, then we had these people who acted sometimes as, I used to call them corporate terrorists. They'd come in, not only were they rowing the boat in the opposite direction you wanted to go in, but they were actively drilling holes in the hull, trying to sink this boat. So if you think about the fear that's going on out there, people think, oh, goodness me, will AI take over my job? Will I lose my role? How can we, as leaders, support our contact center agents? And what's happening with technology that we can talk about today that can alleviate some of that fear?
Thank you, Elias. This is a really important thing that we need to have more of a conversation about across the industry, because we've been talking for years, and we've been guilty of this as well too, about what automation can do for our customers, but actually we haven't had the same level of conversation about what it can do for our people. And here's a couple of stats for you, that 57% of New Zealand workers are at high burnout risk. In our space, we can see across Australia and New Zealand, contact centre turnover of staff can be upwards of kind of 70% in some roles. And if you put that into kind of simple terms, an average wage, let's say 50,000 per agent, if you're constantly having to replace that, the maths are clear. You know, actually investing in that agent experience, better tools, clearer workflows, emotional support is far cheaper than the revolving door. Now, that's just the dollars side thinking about it. That's not even thinking about how we can do better for the people that are actually in our organisations. You know, one thing that we start talking with organisations about is how it can actually reduce the cognitive load that's going through these contact centres and to the agents, because they're carrying so much. As we're starting to see some of the tier one queries get automated, as we spoke about before, that leaves the complex, the emotional, the empathetic responses that it requires, the escalations. And so the knowledge that's kind of surfacing up throughout that is actually putting more pressure on the people that are actually engaged in the places. You know, unfortunately, you know, the contact centre has always been a place for kind of early graduates and people coming into the workforce to kind of start their place. But now we're actually starting to see that those types of roles are becoming more and more technical. It's becoming high empathy. They're requiring absolute complex understandings of lots of different environments, and that kind of emotional weight is it's starting to pull through. So I think as leaders, we need to think about that a little bit more. And last kind of thing to kind of talk about that is how do we then enable the career pathways for the people that are actually coming through into those roles? I actually think there's going to be a real change in the way that we start to think about the people that are going through our businesses. How do we actually train and develop these people if they haven't come through as a junior? How do we start to get them ready for all the different tools, all the different conversations, all the different types of data sets that we have to get access to? I think this, for me, is going to be a real transformation, is actually starting to put more effort back into the space, because as we invest into those people, those are the ones that are going to deal with the hard aspects going into the jobs, and they're going to be the most valuable.
I love the concept because I used to, when I first got involved in the contact centre industry, I've had the privilege of spending over 3 decades here in New Zealand involved within the sector. We used to talk about the contact centre being the entry-level role. So it was an entry-level role on minimum or living wage. Gosh, if you just put those two phrases together, doesn't that sound super sexy?
No, it doesn't.
No, obviously it doesn't. And if you think about that, you're right, becoming more complex. We have a lot of people who I've met across my career who said, I'm now in a senior role, but I started my career off in a contact centre. So if we're now feeding in a workforce into these more entry-level roles, which are now actually no longer entry-level, but more complex, what are we doing? How are we using technology to enhance their experience? How do we take it and help them in real time to deliver this in a way that will make the interaction meaningful for the client and make the work enjoyable for the agents?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're seeing some. There's lots of technologies now that are really being designed around that agent experience. In some cases, we're seeing some great evolution in areas like agent assist, which can actually showcase information to agents in real time as they're starting to work through the interaction with the client. So imagine having a coach. An AI coach that's there kind of helping you walk through that conversation. That could be about product enhancement, but also, as we were just talking about before, could actually also be about some emotional kind of support and making sure that's flagged. We're seeing some great evolution in the space of being able to pick up sentiment throughout the interaction. And as you mentioned before, that could be across omni-channel and multi-channel. It doesn't have to be voice. But let's say an agent was in a tricky situation and they're dealing with a complex requirement. Sentiment can now start to pick up that conversation in real time. And how about informing a supervisor to come in and help and actually potentially even coach? Or what if it actually recognises that in some circumstances that agent has been absolutely spent from that last interaction, and instead of putting them straight back onto their next call or their next chat, actually realising through that sentiment that, hey, maybe it's time for a break and go and take some time out to actually cool your jets, because that was a really tough interaction that just came through. So we are seeing some great evolution in that space that is really coming through to actually help our agents.
I love that, because again, this is about duty of care. We have, as employees and as leaders, that duty of care on our staff. And we are hearing of technology that is growing in its capability almost on a daily basis. And I've seen many implementations here in New Zealand that demonstrate that so well for us. And as I look at that, I think about, have we come that full circle? Because back in the day when I was running contact centres and you had a tricky call, what the agent would do is they lift their hand up. They want help, they lift their hand up. And now we're getting, I guess, that electronic and AI-enabled sentiment analysis that will help us identify when do we have to get up there for them, because they are so overwhelmed. Even if they're working in a remote environment, I think we have enough intelligence in the systems to help guide us and our people. And I think we're also coming that full circle back into voice, because yes, omnichannel is driving a lot of the conversation elements in different components, but the complexity will then come back in to that live agent answering a call and handling it. And maybe we'll see in the future the use of real-time translation in there, and especially if you take a geography like New Zealand, I've heard that by 2035, I believe, Auckland will have more than 50% of its population as non-European. And therefore, we're going to have a situation where people do not have English, as an example, as their first language. Do we see technologies like this coming in? Is it going to be happening in the immediate future, or are we still a long way away from having voice being automatically translated to a high enough level to allow that interactive real-time conversation?
We're seeing significant advancement in the agentic AI voice maturity over the last 18 months, where actually, in many cases, it can be operationalized and trusted. From a customer perspective, we're actually starting to see it move away from that kind of pilot, but into production. We are seeing a few different tranches. So you either have a tranche where it's fully bespoke and kind of you don't have to give it too many things to think about, or more of a packaged type of environment where you might have the agentic solution specifically designed for specific business functions. In Amazon world, as an example, Amazon Connect have just released 4 package updates, one for customer, which turns every interactions into a moment worth remembering, another one about decisions for kind of supply chain and teams associated with that. There's health specific instances that they're thinking about clinical documentation, medical coding, and then talent as well too. So how do you kind of accelerate hiring and the quality of that? So we're starting to see a real kind of enhancement in the space around those agentic solutions. Even right through to, you don't have to be a large enterprise organization that can actually start to do this. Think about a night agent for a small business, for someone to actually answer the calls at night, or a booking platform for a small business that needs help. We're doing some work with a specialist online retailer at the moment for product and inventory support that has been looked at through agentic voice to check stock quantities and kind of information about the products, all without needing that human intervention. So you can be quite specific in the space, and we're seeing great improvement and enhancement in there.
Well, I'm encouraged again by the growth and the development, and I think that we will continue to put the right guide rails in place to ensure that we are providing a safe environment both for our customers as well as our staff. And this is an important development going forward. I probably will look at drawing this conversation to a bit of a close shortly, but let's take a chance to reflect and look back on things. So if you are to look at some of the leaders in the industry today, what advice would you give to leaders navigating change right now?
Yeah, the customer and the agent are on the same team, as I mentioned earlier. I think that is really, really important. So really make sure that agent experience is front and center of what you're thinking about, because those are the things that are going to drive awesome customer outcomes. So keep building the future based around the agent experience. And as kind of part of that, let's make sure that we don't forget to actually bring our people on the journey. not just the destination. I think sometimes we can be guilty as leaders of dropping technology onto our teams at the last minute without actually kind of getting buy-in. And then what we start to get into is organisational change and change management. So, I would bring people along on the journey, help communicate the why before the what, and think about the capability for that. And another one I'd leave with would be kind of building the foundations actually before you scale. So getting that data readiness, making sure there is some governance behind it, that there's that transparency with employees, and setting some goals. Those are the things that are going to really help you to grow faster. And it's the difference that will help you to kind of compound that growth and move and accelerate quicker than your competitors as well.
I couldn't agree any more than that. I've heard this, and I was in a number of forums in the Asia Pac region where, again, they're saying your agents know a lot, get them involved earlier on. They are the voice of the customer in many instances, and often we exclude the customer from the development and understanding their needs. And I think what I'm hearing you say is become more inclusive in the design phase, which will help you deliver a much more effective solution going forward. So then, as a final thought, what's one idea or mindset you'd like listeners to take away?
Really, it's about stop optimizing for a model that needs replacing. So the leaders that are pulling ahead aren't doing the old things better. It's the ones that are asking that fundamental question about what actually is the role of the contact center. What are we trying to do as a business? Who does it serve? But also, what can it be capable of? The technology, it's ready. The infrastructure is there. But what Aotearoa needs now is actually the leadership courage to consider the things that are going to provide better human outcomes for us all.
Better human outcomes for us all. I think that wraps it all up. If we think about the industry, this is definitely something we should be striving towards. Leon, we're just about to close this particular episode. I want to again thank you for the time that you've had with us. Now, if somebody wants to reach out to connect with you, what are the best ways for them to do that?
Yeah, thanks, Elias. Best ways to contact us is through our organisation, Digital Island. You can go to our website, digitalisland.co.nz, or always shoot me an email, leon.s@digitalisland.co.nz. Happy to help in any way we can.
Again, thank you for your time and your wisdom with us today as part of the Kiwi CX Collective podcast. Thank you, Leon.
Thank you, Elias.